Hey, what's up? This is AudiRS3 here. There's no denying short-form video content is pretty entrenched in how we consume fashion online now. We're talking reviews, unboxings, recommendations, outfits, in such high quantities it feels like every second you're not doom scrolling, you're missing out on something. People have already identified problems with fashion content as it stands now, from extremely urgent or transactional language to make people feel like they have to consume things to solve some kind of perceived problem with their wardrobe. Or the proliferation of extremely over-the-top outfits, giving people a false impression of how others actually dress offline. Or the simple fact it's pretty difficult to gauge whether people are subject matter experts or relative fashion newcomers repeating information they've seen elsewhere with little nuance or extra understanding. There are of course upsides too, like great access to new brands, ideas and aesthetics, or the empowerment of creative people to share their great ideas with a potentially wide audience. But I'd like to think about something a little bit more fundamental. What is it exactly that we're consuming? We're taking a deep dive into the world of hyperreality, or the relationship between online fashion content and reality. What does that look like, and what does it mean for us as viewers of this content? We're going to be getting some understanding of the media landscape, and that understanding is going to help us minimize the perceived problems of this kind of modern fashion content and engage with it in a healthier way so we can ascend past your average fashion enjoyer. With that in mind, let's get going. Something most people understand by this point is that social media content is not literally real, but a kind of simulated reality. And some classic examples of that are really obvious, like posing in fake aircraft for the gram, but there's some less obvious ones, like just editing down a vlog to only show the most interesting parts or the highlights. Those things are done to make those images and videos more entertaining for us as the viewer. Of course, the current fashion meta has its fair share of this. The Get Ready With Me format is a super popular way to consume outfit content, and often that will begin like, I'm going to a bookstore, I'm going to grab coffee, or similar, to provide a kind of narrative device and a reason for why they're getting dressed. But are they literally doing that? Are we to believe that Daniel Simmons is putting this outfit on and then immediately going out to grab coffee? Probably not. He's probably doing these things in a big batch and then going to schedule them all out to simulate the reality of this guy getting coffee on different days in different outfits. I'm sure someone out there is shaking and crying that Daniel Simmons is lying to us about when he's going out to get coffee, but I imagine most people don't care too much about whether he steps out of the door the second he stops that video. If anything, maybe that simulated reality is beneficial to us as the viewer. It makes the video a bit more entertaining, and it makes it easier for us to imagine scenarios where we could wear that clothing as well. We gain some additional insight from the stylist versus a contextless image. Simulated reality is all over the place, not just in social media, but media generally, and it's things we can understand because we understand the reality it's referencing, like this picture of me touching grass. Even the most terminally online of you are going to understand what the reality of touching grass is like. Psych, that was a simulation. Or was it? Psych, that was a simulation. Or was. But here's the thing, the more you think about it, online content doesn't reference reality at all. And we've got to engage the galactic brain for this one, but I promise it'll be worth it because it might change the way you think, not just about fashion, but pretty much every piece of media that exists. Jean Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation attempts to make sense of the world in which we find ourselves and is one of the best known examples of postmodern critical theory. In this, he describes reality, an object or idea in its truest form, simulation, a reflection or an abstraction of that idea, but still refers back to something real, and simulacra, something which only refers to other things which they themselves are not real, or something where we need the context of something that isn't real to understand what's going on. This is a tricky concept to get your head around, especially because I'm giving you the abridged version, so I'll give you a pop culture analogy, after which hopefully it will totally make sense. Imagine a cat chasing a mouse. The cat is probably going to catch the mouse and eat it. But now think about Tom and Jerry, which uses our understanding of that reality, but turns it on its head, so now the underdog is the champion, and we've got some comedy violence thrown in there for entertainment's sake as well. Now think about Itchy and Scratchy, a fictional cartoon within another universe which is designed to reference the antics of Tom and Jerry, but turn the comedy violence up to 11 in a way that satirizes the prevalence of violence in children's cartoons. Itchy and Scratchy can only exist because of multiple layers of cultural reference which the viewer will have to understand to really make sense of what's going on. It's so far away from the reality of cat and mouse, it can only exist within the fictional Simpsons Simpsons universe. I mean, we don't even question why the mouse is human-sized and blue.
Lemonade?
Without knowing about The Simpsons, Tom and Jerry, the media landscape of violent cartoons designed for children, Itchy and Scratchy doesn't really make any sense. I'd say Rick and Morty is another strong example of cartoon simulacra, just how much of that is held up and given meaning by other pieces of media and meta references. Some short-form fashion video content clearly fits this too, like outfits inspired by superheroes or video game characters. We as viewers need to understand those media references, as well as the carefully curated brand images built up with millions of marketing dollars to really understand what's going on. Oh yeah, Tony Stark, he'd totally wear Dior. There's something else about these videos though that's really interesting. The superhero is taken out of their original context and placed in a regular home environment. This is for two reasons. One, of course, these outfits are not literally real. No one is going outside wearing these, they're designed for online content consumption. But second, and more interestingly, that expressive outfits shot in a home environment is basically a genre in itself, popularized by people like Wisdom, to the point that if you see a video of someone standing around in a plain backdrop about to drop some fits, you know they're gonna go super hard. That's whether they're impersonating anime characters or doing something completely different. In reality, of course, this makes no sense. Brands put a lot of effort into creating an environment around their clothing to show us how cool and desirable it is. TikTok content does the opposite, showing us that the familiar home environment isn't a place for comfort, understated stuff, but instead the absolute hardest, most outrageous outfits going. It's enough to feel like you're kind of under attack in your own home. The same applies to editing styles, whether it be clothing flying in from the sides of the screen or running commentary over each item of clothing that's going on. These pieces of content are being created not because people want to get ready or because they want to show people getting ready, but they want to get ready in the style of popular online video. That exists solely within an online media world separate from reality. We can guarantee now that some clothing is consumed on the basis that it would look great standing indoors impersonating some fictional icon or fitting into some piece of online content, not for wearing outside at all. Let's talk about those physical items of clothing themselves though. I made an earlier video about microtrends and the role of TikTok in perpetuating the constant shuffle of specific items which are cool or relevant to wear. The good news here is that all kinds of aesthetics have the chance to gain some real traction online, especially in the context of these crazy outfits or quick outfit videos which show people something very new which generates engagement and attention, whether that be positive or negative. We have the potential to see loads of stuff that we might like. Some of it is definitely entirely divorced from reality though. Just think about how blokecore ran through TikTok last year. What is blokecore? How to style blokecore? Essential blokecore items. I can guarantee people bought a football shirt not to support their favourite football team, not even to pretend that they liked football, but to fit in with the blokecore aesthetic. The original reality and context of a football shirt is basically lost here entirely. The team insignia doesn't represent support of a particular team, but represents support of a particular fashion aesthetic. Conversely, you can imagine a TikTok native going out and seeing someone wearing a football shirt and thinking, ah, cool blokecore outfit, when they're not consciously wearing a blokecore outfit, they're just bloke. One has to imagine what other items of clothing have become simulacra, or consumed or worn because of their status or imagined function in the online world, rather than actual function in the real one. How many people have bought Arc'teryx jackets to test them out first under the shower rather than outside? Apart from the aforementioned actual bloke, did people actually see others wearing a blokecore in real life? Fashion trends and the presentation of clothing now live and die much more online than in reality where clothing is intended to be worn. That process is massively accelerated by the speed that people can ingest and create shorter form video content. By the time you see a trending item of clothing, that could be 10th hand information by that point, already caught up in a different web of references and inspiration from pieces of content where the original item or anything experienced in an authentic way is so far away that it's basically become lost. Eventually, the use case for a fashion product is essentially imagined, with more and more content about it just drawing from the simulacra. It's kind of insane to think that trends can live or die with people boosting them having no genuine experience of them whatsoever. Those garments are turned exclusively into media entertainment props. Since pretty much all online fashion content does this to some extent, engages with trends digitally, using other digital content exclusively as evidence, pretty much any piece of online fashion content is part of this simulacra. I realise I'm kind of painting this like an absolute hellscape. Arguably, it does get a little bit worse. You're probably thinking this is the part where I tell you to go and touch grass for real, not just for content. Go look at some fashion in the real world instead. Stop doom scrolling on that phone for micro trends. If only it were that simple. Reality and simulacra are not separate things, and throughout this video I've made multiple references to the idea of people consuming online fashion content and bringing that into the real world. That might be sneakers from recommended lists, that might be outdoor performance jackets from people with no interest in hiking, it might be bloke core outfits from people with no interest in football. Beauregard warns us about exactly this. When we see an example of simulacra, in this case all that online fashion content we talked about, we naturally assume that the opposite of that must therefore be reality. Unfortunately, the two are so closely intertwined that isn't really the case anymore. I'd almost consider it impossible to engage with fashion in a way totally detached from online fashion content. This intertwining, the impossibility of escaping simulacra because of its connection now to the real world, is something Beauregard refers to as hyperreality. It sounds pretty bleak, this idea that TikTok is infecting our culture with all of this nasty content and now it's impossible to find out what's real anymore. Even now, if you go to a physical store and buy something because you like the look of it in reality, who's to say that you didn't initially see that on someone that bought it because of TikTok? Or maybe it's stocked in that shop because it's an online fashion trend. Or maybe the design of that shop is based around it looking good on social media. All of that is true, and yet I'd argue maybe it doesn't matter that much. I think it's easy to blame TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts as these insidious things that are destroying the fabric of fashion and reality. All this discussion about the interlinking of reality and simulacra and the huge availability of information essentially making content meaningless is really poignant today, and I think it does apply to this kind of content really well. But it's not new information. This was written in 1982, now over 40 years ago, and discusses things like televised mass media and reality TV. He even uses Disneyland as an example, something which uses all kinds of technology and trickery to give you this perception of the idealized American main street, which in reality doesn't exist at all. It's the real part of Disneyland that's every bit as fantastical as the rest of the park. Short form video is just the latest medium that's doing all of this, and society is going to change and adapt accordingly to incorporate that influence. I do think in some ways short form video content accelerates or exacerbates the problems of hyperreality. In fact, Fashion Elitist put out a great video taking this perspective, which I think has some very accurate observations, and I'll link that in the description. There are some real dangers of being subjected to video after video which either presents huge amounts of clothing that's just not appropriate for any one person to wear, or crazy, flamboyant, unusual clothing that just makes day-to-day wear look boring by comparison, or extremely transactional or urgent language to make you feel like buying things will solve some perceived problem with how you dress. Collectively, it's a recipe for looking at your own clothing, those things which might make you happy in reality, and thinking, damn, am I mid online? I think this happens subconsciously, and it's more subtle and insidious than people give it credit for. No one's going to watch one video about 7 shoes you totally need to own right now and start crying into their pillow that they don't own any of that stuff. In fact, you're probably not going to take any action at all after seeing that video. But it does just add a little bit to this invisible mental weight. And over time, after hundreds of videos of people wearing these crazy outfits that you're probably never going to wear, recommending products that you don't own, telling you that you need to get rid of all your old stuff and start investing in these new things, that little invisible weight can really start to get crushing. I don't think you need to consciously avoid anything that looks like that, but you should replace that subconscious weight with a conscious reminder that all of this stuff, all that web of referential video after video, doesn't have to reflect your reality. Please don't let these videos suck you dry and turn you into a withered fashion husk. Understanding simulacra, that process of reflections upon reflections until what we're looking at no longer reflects reality, I think is a useful way of being conscious of that. All this content is pure pop culture entertainment created in an online world, which then bleeds back into the real one, not the other way around. I think that consciousness allows you to enjoy this stuff at face value without falsely equating it to any kind of truth about how you need to dress. It's hard to recognize that because it feels so real. After all, these people are in their bedrooms, they're talking directly to us. But if you can make this logical divide in your head between the simulacra of social media content and the reality of what you like and what you happen to be doing, I think it's easier to draw value from those things which might be important to you, or those things which do genuinely resonate with you, whilst keeping the rest at arm's length. My actionable advice of, well duh, just remember it's all entertainment bro, maybe isn't that helpful in itself, but it's more about the reason for remembering why all this stuff is entertainment. As we talked about, these processes are not new to fashion in 2023, but if you subscribe to these theories of simulacra and reality and hyperreality, they've been permeating society for decades. You might even have thought about how this online content can be this sort of chain of endless repetition until it all becomes meaningless. I think it's useful to have ways of explaining that or articulating it. It can help shape some of those thoughts or ideas which you've already had. The irony, of course, is someone making a big long video talking about the cultural landscape of hyperreality also contributes to hyperreality. Whoops.